Hi, everyone. So, this is the last session in the Crush Domestic Violence series that myself, Anika Leonard, has curated in partnership with Alafia, located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so I wanted to just kind of do a recap of where we have gone so far, and really just spend some time giving some of my reflections on the things that we've talked about, like what it felt like, even like doing this series, and yeah, and then just seeing if anyone had any questions or anything that they would like to have answered. And so, my name is Anika Leonard, and I am the CEO of Priceless Insight. And Priceless Insight's mission is to uplift the experiences of Black women, girls, and gender expansive or gender beyond youth. And we uplift those experiences through prevention, intervention, and leadership development. And one of the things that is like really key to Priceless Insights um programming and just like who we are as an organization is that like we don't want to go along with the status quo. We don't want to do things as they've always been done. I talked about my journey, like at the beginning of this series. I talked about my journey over the last 20 years in the movement to like end gender-based violence. And in that journey, like my viewpoints on a lot of things have changed, right? um Priceless Insight is a culturally specific organization. Like we are very specific to Black people, and the African diaspora. And so when I speak, I'm speaking from that lens, but I also want to make sure that people know that I'm not trying to minimize anyone's experiences with any of the violence that I speak about. I'm just speaking from my viewpoints about like things that I've learned and things that I'm unlearning about, like the way that violence shows up in our community. And so, like, when I like to say that there was like a formal way that I started in this movement, and then there's an informal way. So the informal way, if I count how long I've been doing this work informally, I would be counting things like like basically being that go-to person that my friends would call, like when they wanted to speak with somebody about, like whatever was going on with them. Like I had my own crisis line before I even knew that it was a such thing as a crisis line, right? I was that person that folks went to. And so, and that included things like domestic violence and things of that nature, right? Or, like what I knew then as domestic violence, right? And so when I fast forward from that to like me formally entering the movement, I think the formality, like when you like go to any job, start any new job, you have like an orientation process or indoctrination, if you will. And so what I didn't realize at the time is that I was being indoctrinated into a system that ultimately didn't serve me and didn't serve the people that, I cared most about anyway. And I know that that could be like, kind of upsetting to hear. Let me fix this little hair that's going somewhere. But I know that that could be a little upsetting to hear. But if you look at, the experiences of Black women in this movement, you will see that like most of us have experiences some of the same things that we're talking about when we talk about domestic violence. And Mason, Sarah, if you can drop in the definition of domestic violence in the chat. So if we're talking about domestic violence, it's basically like a series of behaviors that are used to control somebody, right? And like a lot of Black women and a lot of Black advocates in the field have experienced those same behaviors from the institutions and the systems that are employing them, right? And I experienced them as a survivor of sexual violence. I experienced them as a survivor of domestic violence. I've experienced them as an advocate, like working, like I said, in this movement, and it's been over 20 years. And I've experienced it so many times, and so like those experiences have really caused me to take a step back and figure out, like, okay, well, where is it that I see myself? Where is it that I see my work? And where is it that I see my community? Because my community is me, and my community is, the reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, right? And so when I began to look at, those things and take those things into consideration, it really started this process where I had to start like purging, like someone else's idea of what violence look like, right? Because like I would be in these predominantly white institutions, and their idea of violence, like was very specific to, abusers and these people. But, when it came to them identifying those same behaviors in the way that they showed up in the workplace, in the way that they showed up to Black survivors, for instance, then it was a difference and they just couldn't see it, and then, and it was like, all of the things like the behaviors that, like we would say, all of the behaviors that we would say happen when you are experiencing domestic violence, like being gaslit, people playing mind games with you, people stringing you along, people outright lying to you, things of that nature. Like all of those things were happening, and like the movement couldn't see it, the institutions couldn't see it. They would blatantly disrespect and, cause harm to Black communities and still be able to get funding. And so those sorts of things like really, really made me take a step back. And it's really has me thinking, like why would I want to continue to participate in that system? It doesn't make sense to me, and even the people who are supposed to like be in positions where they like protect us or gatekeep or things of that nature, like they're supposed to protect the community from the institutional harm that happens, like those they're some of the same ones who are perpetuating it, even when they look like us, and so I just find that like I'm just really exhausted. I am honestly exhausted from spending so much time fighting and trying to convince people that the harm that they're causing is real, and it's no different than the harm that's being caused by people who they label as abusers in intimate partner violence situations, right? Is so real, it is so exhausting, to come up against those very systems, to come up against like discrimination from your peers, things of that nature. It's a lot. And so I was um I was sharing that I'm just a little tired. That doesn't mean that the fight isn't going to continue. It just means that I'm going to do it in a different way. Like I'm reframing it. There is no fight for me anymore. To be completely honest, like there's no fight. I don't have anyone to fight. I don't have enemies, or like I don't want to say a cause. Um, but I'm leaning more towards healing. I'm leaning more towards restoration. I'm leaning more towards creating a future that I want to see for people who've been impacted by harm, regardless of how it shows up, whether we label it as domestic violence, trafficking, stalking, teen dating violence, however we label it. Like I'm moving more towards this space where I want to be more a part of the healing journey and less a part of the institutions that are causing the harm to take place to begin with, causing and perpetuating and exacerbating the harm that's taking place. And so this series has really been about me, like, basically just trying to just get out there like some of my views and opinions on these things, because I've been impacted by domestic violence, right? And so in my unlearning, I've decided to start saying that, like, yes, it's beneficial to have this like series of behaviors that describe domestic violence, but it's also beneficial for us to have, like, um I want to say space and hope for a different future. I think it's also beneficial for us to have, to recognize that these behaviors happen and they take place, and they don't only happen and take place in intimate partner relationships, but it can take place in like parental relationships, like in caregiver relationships, parent to child to parent. It can take, these behaviors can take place among children, among friendships, like they can take place like across the board, because like the behaviors that we characterize as domestic violence, like they're learned behaviors. And so like at any stage that a person has learned them, they can start using these behaviors to like manipulate and control an outcome, and because all of those things can be true and happening at once, like we got to expand the conversation and not just say that, okay, like domestic violence or intimate partner violence is, like this thing that we need to dedicate this whole month to, but not look at how we could be perpetuating that same harm, not just during the month of October, which is, deemed as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but also during, like the rest of the year. Like, how are we showing up in our day-to-day lives? How are we showing up as parents? How are we showing up as co-workers? How are we showing up as CEOs or executive directors? Like, how are we showing up in the community? So like I said, I really wanted to extend the conversation. So if you missed the first 3 sessions, because it's 5, yeah, it was 5. I missed last week because I was not feeling well, and I decided to not push myself. But if you missed the first 3 sessions, we gave some definitions of like what we label as domestic violence. We also talked about the unlearning that I'm doing, and leaning more towards like transformative justice, and leaning more towards patriarchal violence. And so we have a definition of patriarchal violence that Mason Sarah is going to throw in the chat for us. And so with this patriarchal violence, I think that speaks more to what I was saying earlier, where we're looking at the systems and the institutions and the way that they cause harm to gender oppressed people. And so I'm really interested in having and continuing that conversation, so you all can see that our information, like our website, our Facebook, our Instagram, our Twitter, my LinkedIn, like all of that information is scrolling at the bottom of the page. So if you have, like seen any of these videos and decided like, hey, I want to like further this conversation, or, like just really kind of talk more about like why you feel this way or think this way, or whatever the case may be, like the point in these videos was to really just start having conversations. It was to get me out there as a person, like I said, who've experienced this. And this is the first time in the 20 plus years that I've been doing this work that I've been able to, like commit to and actually follow through with doing a video series. And that's for a number of reasons. So one, I am just not a video person, like I'm not a live person. I'm not a social media kind of person. At least I've never been, I never identified as such, I should say. And so like it's like technology making everything work right when you're trying to like coordinate this sort of thing has been it's been a blessing with Alafia, like as our partners. But me doing it myself, like it would have been a definite struggle. And so like that's one of the reasons. And then the other one is like it requires a deep level of vulnerability. It requires, like you to really put yourself out there and put your thoughts out there. And like those things are subject to scrutiny. They're subject to, like whatever comes out in people, right? Like somebody may hear, things that I say, and they may say like, oh, well, she's not for survivors, or, like people can use the things that you say, they can take them out of context, they could use them against you. And with this month in 2022, y'all, I decided I am not about to let any of that stand in my way. I'm going to say what needs to be said under the understanding and the guise that I am still learning. I am still unlearning a lot of things. And I am, still on this like healing journey, but also still like educating myself. And so like this may be how I feel right now. And it may change 10 years from now, or it may not. I don't know. But I'm just putting it out there. I'm sparking conversation. I've gotten some great feedback so far about like, what the series has, how the series has impacted people. People have, like direct messaged me and things of that nature. And so that has all been really beautiful. The other thing is like, I know that this is such a super sensitive topic. in the Black community, particularly because it requires us to like really unpack some things that we may not have known were there. And what I would encourage folks to do, like if you have seen any parts of these series and it like sparks something in you, it brings something up, it makes you angry, um, like it makes you want to debate or, call out versus call in, any of those things. Like I encourage you to like really interrogate where those feelings are coming from, like to start with yourself first, right? Before you do any external, like, hey, you this, hey, you that, fill in the blank. Before you do any of that, search inward and see like why am I being restimulated or triggered by this information that's being shared? Why is it that I have, like what's coming up for me, right? And then if you get to that place and you're like, okay, well, I see that this stuff is coming up for me, but I'm still interested in engaging in conversation. Do so. Like reach out, because I'm really interested in engaging in conversation. And that's, like I said, the whole reason why I even got this started. I'm really interested in it. I wish we, would have had more conversation and things of that nature, like in the chats and stuff, while this thing was going on. But please feel free, if you see this on YouTube or Facebook or any of those other places, please feel free to, like engage and tag me so that I can engage in conversation. And, like we can really just start unpacking what it means to look at ourselves and look at the ways that we could have possibly caused harm. And I'm not going to ask anyone to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. And so, in like third, the second session in this series, I my 27-year-old is a independent contractor with Priceless Insight, with my company, and they happen to join us on the second Crush Domestic Violence series. And so on the second installment, we had a very like organic conversation about how I have used patterns of physical violence and emotional abuse and things of that nature, like while they were growing up. And like I said, domestic violence is a learned behavior, but just because I learned it and I can recognize that I learned it from somewhere doesn't mean that I'm not accountable for the impact that it had, right? On my children, on, like my nieces and nephews, like it has a lasting impact, you know what I'm saying? And so what I wanted to do also with this series was to encourage parents, like I said, to look at, some of their own behaviors, but also create that space so that we can like really talk about and repair the harm that has been caused to our children. A lot of times, like folks end up in these situations where they are accepting less than what they deserve, in situations where they are, being physically harmed or manipulated or gaslit, because they already have experience in it. They've already, like, it's familiar to them, and we are creatures of habit. We are creatures of comfort. And so I'm not saying that we are comforted, but if a person displays behaviors that are familiar to us, and their energy is familiar to us, then sometimes, because I mean, I'm gonna just use myself as an example. Sometimes we feel like we can, because we know that behavior, like for, I'm gonna just, like I said, use myself as an example. So I was in a relationship last year with a person, and this person loved to play mind games, loved to like just do things, right? Like I would pull out my phone, and like she would be in my phone more than I would, like trying to see who I'm talking to and things of that nature. And that bugged the mess out of me, y'all. Like woo, that bugged the mess out of me. Like she had a lot of red flags and behaviors that I was just like overlooking. And then I had a lot of toxic stuff, right? Because I'm not exempt from this, right? Like I had a lot of toxic stuff. I felt like because I saw and recognized some of these behaviors that I could somehow work with them, because it was familiar to me. I felt like I could, since I knew what she was doing, I could, help her move beyond that by showing her that she didn't have to be that way. And then, like I said, even my own stuff started to show up, right? Like violence is not a stranger to me, and sometimes like my automatic response is a violent one. And I have worked really, really, really hard to have that not be the case, right? So sometimes my automatic response may be something that I'm thinking in my head, but it doesn't go as far as to actually physically harm someone, right? And sometimes, like my mouth can be slick, right? But I try not to be in a space where I am intentionally causing harm to people, even if they've harmed me, right? um because that's just not the kind of person that I want to be anymore. That's not the kind of life that I want to live. That's not the energy that I want to put out there. And so I think that example was like a really good example of how, like, even like the what's comforting, what's familiar to us, and I think that's an even better word. What's familiar to us, like that can sometimes lead us down a road where, like, before we know it, because we were thinking that we had control and we had a handle of the situation, before we know it, it can grow into something that we don't have control over, or that we easily dismiss. We can be like, oh, they're not gonna do nothing, or like I talk like this all the time to them, and we have no idea, where people's mindsets are. We have no idea, like, what could be that straw that breaks the camel's back. Like, we have no idea. And so I wanted part of this series to be like some encouragement for people who've experienced harm in the form of intimate partner violence or domestic violence or patriarchal violence. I really wanted this to be a part of that. But I think a large part of what needed to take place is for me to kind of come to terms with some of the things that I've experienced, some of the harm that I've caused, and some of the harm that has been caused to me, right? And so I think that the encouragement could still be, because there could be people like me out there who've caused harm and who have been harmed by intimate partner violence, right? So there can be people out there and you can still get something from this, but there'll be just probably another time. I have to do this another time where I'm really just pouring into survivors, because I think it's important to kind of balance it out, right? Like, it's not just um in survivors and people who were harmed, right? Because some people don't identify with the word survivor. Some people don't identify with people who caused harm. Some people don't identify with people who've been harmed. However you identify, I want to make space for all of us to join the conversation, right? And to just really be able to unpack what it means to be in a society where these behaviors are so entrenched that we don't even see them, or that we are so um busy with surviving patriarchal violence and surviving these harmful systems that we don't even recognize how we've integrated some of these practices into our own lives, right? So, like I said, I'm really, really interested in having that conversation. And I hope that you all continue to join me. Follow us on social media. Like I said, our information is scrolling at the bottom. DM me if this information, if anything that I've said over the last 4 weeks have impacted you, positive or negative. Like, I want to hear like what's going on with you. Don't come at me cussing me out though, because that ain't gonna go over well. I'm gonna just let you know now. That ain't gonna go over well. You will just get blocked, because there's no conversation at that point, because that tells me that you're coming to the table with ego, in hand. And when ego is present, it's really hard to get to the root of the matter. It's really hard for us to have a conversation, because one person only wants to listen to respond versus listen to, like, actually hear another person's point of view. So if you want to have a conversation, I'm good with that. But if not, just gonna do what you do. So thank you all for joining me tonight, for this, last portion of this Crush Domestic Violence series. I appreciate you like joining us, being here, commenting, even if you didn't comment and just had a conversation with your friend about it, like that's still, like raising awareness and getting in, like starting the conversation. So whatever role you played in, engaging with this information, I thank you. And I hope that you all are, doing well. And I look forward to doing more of these and to having you all join us in the near future. So thank you and have a good night.